Is Ghanan, like if you're talking about the people, Ghanan or Ghanaian?
What?
Ghanaian? The people from Ghana.
No, you have to say
The last two episodes, we visited two European countries with two very mainstream meals that I would reckon a lot of people already know about. The first one being caprese salad from Italy, and the second one being French onion soup from, well, France. This week I wanted to go a different direction for a couple reasons. The first is I want to establish that this is not going to be a European and American food only channel. I want to discuss history from all walks of life. One of those includes today's video. The second thing is I just really love this recipe. This recipe is something that I learned while I was working at a church up in New Jersey. I met a woman from Nigeria named Yoli, and she taught me about today's dish. And I wanted to bring that to you as it's something that has inspired me to broaden my own horizons, and it has a really fun history. So, what is today's dish? Jollof rice, and more specifically, Nigerian jollof rice. Now, one thing that we'll get into a little bit later is that there are multiple styles of jollof rice. The whole area from Western to Central Africa have different variations. So what's the story of jollof rice? Well, first of all, it is definitely a family meal, and the intention is to serve it as a community. So that's why I have it on this massive platter right here. This is definitely not all for me, I promise, but I wanted to really showcase what the intention behind jollof rice is as a community meal. So, as I said earlier, there are different styles of jollof rice, and Nigerian jollof rice is not the original. The reason I chose it, even if it isn't the original jollof rice, is because this is the one that I was taught from Yoli in New Jersey. So what is the original jollof rice? Well, unlike the French onion soup recipe, it can actually be put to a specific location, relative date, and to a specific people. The most likely origin of jollof rice comes from the Senegambia region of West Africa. The main places that we know today that comprise the Senegambia region would be Senegal, Gambia, as well as Mauritius. Back in the 14th, 16th century, Portugal had begun to come to the western side of Africa and set up trading posts. One of those post was along the Senegal River in the Senegambia region. This place was already prolific with rice production. It was known as the Grain Coast. In 1448, this trading post from Portugal was set up along the Senegal River where there was already a lot of rice being produced. And one of the main things that Portugal began to trade was tomatoes. And between rice and tomatoes, you already have 95% of this dish made. So this dish is comprised of something that is very authentically African. And the name of the dish, jollof rice, actually comes from the empire that was established in the Senegambia region during the time that the Portuguese were coming and beginning to trade. And the name of the empire is the Jollof Empire, or the Wolof Empire. So the name comes from the region, and the ingredients come from West Africa and Portugal. The creation of jollof rice can actually be pinpointed to one specific cook in Senegal, and their name was Penda Mbaye. Penda Mbaye was working on a dish that was already made using barley and chunks of tomato. But due to a barley shortage in the 14th through 16th century, she actually ended up having to use rice instead of barley, and she mixed it with pureed tomatoes to make a jollof prototype. Now over time, it's been developed and adding spices and different flavorings, putting chicken on top, fried plantains, and other sides to make it what it is today. As I stated before, there are different regions where jollof rice has different styles. So the thing that makes Nigerian jollof rice its own is that it often uses habaneros or curry powder to add spice to it. The Ghanaians tend to use warming spices like cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg, while people from Senegal add tamarind to their jollof rice. So if any of those variations sound appealing to you, you might want to consider seeing how you can change the recipe to make your own jollof rice. The people of West Africa and Central Africa tend to have some banter involving jollof rice. The same way, as I said earlier, people from America might talk about what type of pizza is the best. You know, one person from New York City will say theirs is the best, and Chicago will say theirs is the best, and Detroit will incorrectly say that theirs is the best. But it has been something that has been going on for a long time between arguing where the origins were, what style is the best. I learned Nigerian jollof rice from a Nigerian woman, and of course she said it was the best. And I haven't tried a lot of different styles, but I have to say this is absolutely amazing, and I can't imagine it being much better. And before we get into the recipe, I want to talk about how jollof rice has become a prototype for American foods that we might know as well. So West Africa was a common place for slave traders to come and steal people from their homes. The Senegambia region was no different. And one of the things we'll get into in some later recipes that I have planned is how people from Africa who were enslaved in America would take ingredients and techniques from their homeland and use them when making food for themselves in America and create our own dishes. And a couple of those that come from jollof rice that you might know are gumbo and jambalaya. Those clearly have Creole roots and are probably also attributed to African Americans in Louisiana or similar areas, but it is definitively based on Western African food. And it's important to recognize how food is translated, especially Africans who were forced into slavery in America, because many of our foods, specifically foods that are popular in the South, do come from African origins. But enough about that. We have a big pile of jollof rice. I am going to dig into it, and we're going to get into the recipe. Okay, so we are making our jollof rice. We're going to start by making a tomato stew. And to do this, you're going to get 1 pound of Roma tomatoes or plum tomatoes, and we're going to de-seed them. I started doing this with a spoon and realized it was actually a lot easier to just dig my fingers in and get out all of the seeds. And I want to let you know that I am actually doing a double-sized recipe here. The proportions I'm giving you are half of what you see me making here. So if it seems like I'm making a lot more than I'm telling you, that's why. So I'm de-seeding all of these tomatoes and I'm blending them up in a high-powered blender until they're relatively smooth. And then I'm adding in 3.5 ounces or 1/4 cup of tomato paste. I'm going to blend these up until they are very, very smooth. If you want it to be chunkier, you can. It's not really a big deal. I just liked it really smooth. Next, add a little olive oil to a large pot and then add in 1 or 2 medium diced onions. Depends on how much onion flavor you want in your final dish. And we're just going to sweat those out until they've softened a little bit. We're not trying to get any color. After that, we're going to add our pureed tomato mixture that you made just a moment ago. And you're going to continuously stir that for about 10 to 15 minutes while it simmers. You want it to reduce by about 1/4 of the volume it already was You'll tell it's starting to get done when the tomatoes start to separate from the oil. Then you're going to pour that out into a vessel and save it for later. Now we're moving on to the actual jollof rice. Again, we're putting 1 diced onion into a pot with oil, and we're stirring that until softened. And then we're going to add in 3 cups of chicken stock and about 1.5 cups of the tomato stew. Stir that until homogeneous and bring it up to a boil. Once it's up to a boil or a simmer, you can add in 2 to 3 sprigs of thyme. Next thing you're going to add is 1 3/4 cup of parboiled rice. You do not want to use just regular rice. You need it to be parboiled for this recipe to work. You can usually buy parboiled rice at basically any grocery store. If you cannot find parboiled rice, I will leave a link in the description on how to make parboiled rice at home. It's super easy, it's just 1 extra step. Put a lid over the top, let it simmer for about 30 minutes. While that's going, I am going to make some fried plantains. This is entirely optional, but I highly recommend it. I just cut some plantains on a diagonal or on a bias, and I'm frying them in some olive oil until they start to brown on the edges and are crispy. But seriously, I really recommend these. They get crispy, but they are soft and starchy on the inside. Honestly, they're kind of like French fries, but I don't want to make that bold of a claim, but they're so good. Hit them with a little bit of salt at the end and toss them around, and then save those for your final dish. After about 30 minutes, you want to take the lid off and give it a stir. You'll see that the rice has basically absorbed all of the tomato stew. And I would just give it a taste to make sure that the rice is completely done. If the rice is done to your liking, then just leave the lid off and boil out any excess liquid. Once that's done, season to taste and you're ready to serve. So I'm just loading it onto this massive serving platter that I have. Obviously you don't have to do this and you can just dish it up to family. I just wanted to do it to kind of emphasize the community aspect of this meal. And I'm also going to add baked chicken thighs. This is entirely optional. I didn't show this because I figured you can probably figure out how to cook chicken at this point. But it's not necessary, but it is a good addition. Then I'm just adding some of the fried plantains to complete the dish. And now you have a Nigerian jollof rice to trump every jollof rice you will ever try in your life. Thank you for watching this episode. Make sure to check out my French onion soup and caprese salad episodes as well, full of history and delicious recipes.